G'day, this is Sarah from Amateur Filmies, and today I wanted to take you through my favourite films from each genre. Now, this is actually a really hard video for me to do, but I was feeling really inspired by other YouTubers like Lawrence Collection and Bushman Blue, so I thought I'd give it a try myself. I really hope you like my pick. So we're going to start off with animation, and I chose Satoshi Kon's Perfect Blue. I only watched this a few weeks ago with Matt and my brothers. I thought it was going to be a fun little anime, but it turned out to be a really dark exploration of like pop culture and being a pop star and stalking. This film is actually surprisingly very brutal and explicit, so do not watch this with kids, please. But the plotline sort of reminds me of what happened to Björk, I think that's how you pronounce her name, in the 1990s. She was actually faced with a stalker who escalated things violently, and he became obsessed with her and went to extreme measures to sort of be with her. And that really scarred and took a toll on her mental health. Similar things happened to the character within this film. I don't want to go into too much detail because I don't want to spoil it. But if you're a fan of sort of thrillers, movies about stalkers, you would find this incredibly fascinating. So I highly recommend this one, and an amazing play on the psychological thriller genre as well. So next up we have horror, and for a lot of you this will come as no surprise if you've watched our previous videos. But my favourite horror film is The Ring. Now, this is Gore Verbinski's American Ring. I really love the Japanese original, but for me, this freaks me out every time. There's just something so visceral. I think it's like the blue tint about it. It's just creepy as hell. It's the perfect horror movie, and I cannot fault it. So the next genre we have is movies based on comic books. And I'm not the biggest Marvel or DC fan, but if I had to pick a favourite, it would definitely be Thor Ragnarok by Taika Waititi. This was the film that sort of got me into the Marvel franchise, you know, the Avengers and stuff, because it was just so funny. And then the colour palette was amazing. Cate Blanchett as a villain is unbeatable. And also the soundtrack was amazing too. And I didn't really sort of care for Chris Hemsworth's portrayal of Thor until this movie. I thought he delivered it perfectly. All the side characters were amazing. I can't really fault this one. So the next genre is fantasy or adventure. Now, I was trying hard not to pick the Twilight franchise because I really love that franchise despite all the hate it gets. But there is one particular movie that sort of trumps all other fantasy and adventure movies for me, and that is The Mummy. This really is a perfect film. I feel like Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz's characters were like the ultimate couple goals. I thought they were amazing as a kid, and I think they're amazing now. But also, this film kickstarted my love of horror in the same way that the Scooby-Doo films did, but in a more intense way because this movie was legitimately scary. And I know that the effects have probably aged badly, but I still think it's really scary when I watch it now. So the next genre we have is romance, and I found it really hard to pick a film from this category because I feel so strongly about this genre. But there is one particular movie that I think is an absolute masterpiece, but I actually can't bring myself to watch it very much because it breaks my heart every time. And that is Moulin Rouge by Baz Luhrmann. So, like Thor Ragnarok, this film features a really beautiful and vivid colour palette and set. And it also has an amazing soundtrack, like the best soundtrack in a movie ever. But it also features a very complex and tragic love story that's played perfectly by Ewan McGregor and Nicole Kidman. Moulin Rouge definitely felt like the peak of like romantic cinema for me personally. It came out similar time to sort of Titanic. So I really look at those two films as very similar in how they portray love and, you know, the tragedy of love. So the next genre we have is Westerns, and I personally haven't seen a whole lot of Westerns, so this was a bit hard until I remembered one particular movie, and that decision was super easy, and that was No Country for Old Men by the Coen brothers. I'm a massive fan of horror, and I've seen a whole host of terrifying movie villains, but no one has scared me quite like Anton Chigurh. He almost doesn't feel human. The way he moves, he sort of feels like more like a force of nature. And he almost comes around to the characters sort of like the Grim Reaper. Like once you have met him, you know that you're pretty much stuffed. So the next genre we have is action, and that is Mad Max Fury Road. So it's been years since I've seen George Miller's original trilogy, but this 2015 film really reignited my love for the Mad Max universe and for this beautiful and obviously ugly sort of dystopian society that Miller had created. So while this film does appeal on a basic level for action, the thought that is put into every single scene, the costuming, the way the characters act, the background of the actors turns this film into more of an epic. So our next genre is comedy, and there is only one film I want to talk about today, and this might not be familiar to non-Australian audiences, but for any Australian people watching this video, I'm sure you know this film, and I really hope you love it like I do, and that is Rob Sitch's The Castle. So the plotline to this film is really simple. A working class dad takes the Australian government to court so he can save his house that they want to knock down so they can expand an airport. If a historian were to study 80s and 90s Australia and wanted to get a feel for what it was like, I would point towards this film. This perfectly encapsulates Australian life and the Australian dream. And much of the humour actually comes from how simple the family are. It also features a young Eric Banner and the serial killer from Hounds of Love, but he plays a much nicer role in this. So the next genre we have is science fiction, and the movie I chose for this one is M. Night Shyamalan's Signs. I know you could argue this is technically a thriller, but no other alien movie terrifies me more. No other alien movie was doing what this film was doing. For a movie where you don't actually see the aliens in full until like the third act, this does a really good job of making us dread their impending arrival. And I think that dread is created really well through M. Night Shyamalan's atmosphere that he creates, like constantly we're feeling uneasy, like something isn't right. Our final genre is drama, and I found this really hard because I love a lot of drama films, but there was one that we watched a few weeks ago that I fell in love with. I thought it was amazing and it broke my heart, and that is Joint Security Area. The plotline to this film is pretty simple. So 2 North Korean soldiers and 2 South Korean soldiers form a friendship. And they're patrolling the DMZ, and their friendship is obviously forbidden because they're from conflicting countries and they have very different ideologies. Nevertheless, they meet up in secret and they share stories, they laugh together, and they give each other gifts. The movie actually begins with an investigation into the fallout of a situation that's occurred at a military outpost. And through sort of interrogations and interviews, we start to piece together the events that took place at that night. This movie does a really good job of making you question what's happening within a scene and questioning the relationship that 2 characters have. The tragedy comes within this film when you realize that trust and friendship can be easily torn apart by ideologies and allegiances, and you're actually left with a really sad and shocking conclusion. So that concludes my list. Those are my favourite movies from each genre. Let me know what you think of them or what ones you would recommend based on those. Additionally, let me know what your favourites are from each genre, and I highly encourage you to make your own video based on this. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.